The story begins in the forgotten hills of southern France, in a province once called Gévaudan. In the mid-1700s, this was a place of fog, hunger, and superstition. A landscape where the church bell marked the rhythm of life and death. People lived close to the earth, and even closer to fear. Wolves roamed the forests, yes. But what appeared in 1764 was not a wolf. Everyone agreed on that. The first attack came quietly. A young shepherdess tending her cattle never returned home. The next morning, what was found of her body was barely human. The villagers whispered of demons and witches. Priests spoke of God's punishment. Hunters blamed wolves, but even they hesitated to enter the woods. Whatever was out there moved like an animal, yet killed like something else entirely, something with intention. Over the months that followed, the killings spread. Farmers, shepherds, children walking to mass, torn apart in broad daylight. The wounds were precise, almost surgical. Victims were decapitated, limbs stripped clean. One survivor swore she saw the creature stand upright before vanishing into the trees. Another described it as a monstrous dog with a chest like a horse and jaws that could crush bone. Word traveled fast. France was a nation of rumor, and Gévaudan became its obsession. The newspapers, hungry for sensation, gave it a name: La Bête de Gévaudan, the Beast of Gévaudan. By the end of the year, it was no longer just a local nightmare. It was a national scandal. The king himself, Louis XV, heard the stories. Royal hunters were sent from Versailles. They arrived with fine uniforms, polished muskets, and arrogance that dripped from their every gesture. They believed this would be a quick hunt, a noble distraction. They were wrong. The forests swallowed them whole. They returned weeks later with nothing but mud, failure, and excuses. The killings continued. In Paris, pamphlets and broadsheets began to speculate. Some claimed it was an exotic animal, a lion escaped from a private menagerie. Others insisted it was punishment for the sins of France, and yet others, whispering in taverns and church corners, said it was a man, or something worse wearing the shape of one. By 1765, Gévaudan was collapsing under hysteria. Villagers refused to work the fields. Bells tolled each night for the dead. The church declared days of fasting and prayer. The crown, desperate to silence the embarrassment, dispatched François Antoine, the king's own lieutenant of the hunt. He arrived with soldiers, bloodhounds, and a promise to end the terror. For months, Antoine combed the region. He tracked prints as large as a man's hand, followed trails of blood into the mountains, and set traps baited with human corpses. Finally, that autumn, his team brought down a massive wolf near the forest of Chazes. It was the size of a small horse, its fur coarse and dark, its mouth bristling with broken teeth. They displayed the carcass like a trophy and sent it to Versailles, where the court proclaimed victory. Except it wasn't. The beast was dead. Just weeks later, France the killings resumed. More brutal, more frequent, almost mocking. Whatever haunted Gévaudan was still alive, or had never been an animal to begin with. Modern researchers have pored over these records for centuries. The official count lists 210 attacks, 113 deaths, most of them women and children. Eyewitnesses described a pattern. The creature always targeted the head and neck. It ignored livestock. It avoided men armed with guns. It seemed to kill not for hunger, but for pleasure. In the archives of the French National Library, faded letters still bear the testimonies. A parish priest wrote, "This beast is no common predator. It is guided by a malice that breathes." And that's where the mystery deepens. Centuries later, cryptozoologists, historians, and forensic experts have each offered their own theory. Some say it was a hybrid, a wolf crossed with a mastiff, trained by a human. Others suggest a surviving remnant of an extinct species, perhaps a prehistoric predator drawn out of isolation. But the most disturbing theory is human, One hunter's journal from 1766 mentions a man named Jean Chastel, a reclusive farmer known for his strange behavior and his skill with animals. He was rumored to have kept an enormous hound, half tame, half wild, trained to attack on command. When the royal forces failed, Chastel took matters into his own hands. In June 1767, he claimed to have killed the beast with a single shot, a silver bullet. According to local lore, the body was dissected and buried in secret, and once again, the killing stopped. But the legend doesn't end there. Modern forensic analysis, where possible, challenges the details. No verified remains of the so-called beast were ever recovered. The taxidermied carcass, supposedly sent to Versailles, vanished from royal records. Some historians believe the king ordered its destruction to hide the truth, that the terror of Gévaudan was not a monster, but a man. The pattern of attacks, the selective targeting, and the psychological terror all hint at something beyond animal instinct. There were reports of multiple creatures moving together, attacking in coordinated fashion, impossible for a lone predator. Some modern criminologists suggest this was the work of a serial killer, operating under the cover of superstition, using trained animals to conceal the crimes. In a world without forensics, without law enforcement beyond the church, it would have been easy to hide behind the myth. And yet, the eyewitness accounts remain maddeningly consistent. Something with fur, jaws, claws, and eyes that burned in the dark. Peasants, priests, soldiers, none of them had reason to lie. Even François Antoine, a man of reason and science for his time, admitted the creature's anatomy did not fit the nature of any known species. Today, scientists who study the original reports point out details that feel almost cinematic. An animal with a long snout, elongated body, reddish fur, and a stripe down its back. It matched no European wolf. Some claim it could have been a sub-Saharan predator brought to France by a noble family, a hyena perhaps, escaped or released. But that theory too feels incomplete, because the beast of Gévaudan was not merely an animal that killed. It was a story that consumed a country. It revealed what happens when fear spreads faster than fact, when power hides behind myth, and when people begin to believe that evil has a face. For 3 years, that fear ruled. Farmers refused to leave their homes. Mothers carried blades into the fields. The church called it a test from God. The crown called it an embarrassment. But for the people who lived through it, it was real as the blood in the snow. Centuries later, the region has changed. Forests reclaimed the ruins of the villages. Wolves returned, then disappeared again. But the story lingers. Tourists still visit the small museum in Sauges, where glass cases display crude muskets, letters, and sketches of the beast. Children grow up hearing that in their great-grandparents' time, something unspeakable came out of the woods. And then there's the unease, that quiet, persistent feeling that not everything has been explained. In the modern age of science and skepticism, the beast of Gévaudan remains a problem that refuses to be solved. Every explanation, no matter how logical, leaves something missing. Maybe that's why the story endures. Because the beast, in a way, was never just an animal. It was a reflection of fear, of control, of the way people turn to myth when logic fails them. France in the 1760s was a nation on the edge of revolution, starving, faith-worn, and fractured. The beast gave shape to that chaos. It offered a name for everything that felt wrong and unholy. And when the final shot was fired, and silence returned to Gévaudan, the people didn't celebrate. They just went back to their fields, waiting for the next shadow to move. Years later, a chronicler wrote, "The beast was not killed. It merely changed its face." That line still echoes. Today, when investigators revisit the archives, the faded ink, the trembling handwriting of terrified witnesses, it reads less like a record of attacks and more like the anatomy of mass fear. A community haunted not just by a predator, but by what it believed that predator represented. In the end, the truth may never be known. Whether it was a monstrous wolf, A killer in disguise? Or something stranger still? The Beast of Gévaudan stands as one of Europe's oldest unsolved mysteries. A story written in blood and belief. One that bridges the wild forests of 18th century France with the modern hunger for the inexplicable. And somewhere in those mountains, beneath the moss and the stones, something remains buried. A jawbone, a tooth, a myth too stubborn to die.